Hello BookTube and welcome to the show. To my regular people, thank you so much, I love you all, but if you're brand new to this channel, it's never too late to join a cult. Just press subscribe and join us. I think I'm going to start grading the severity of the spoiler warning on these book reviews, because with some books it simply doesn't matter how much you know about the plot, it's not key to the enjoyment. But with this one I think it's far better to go in blind, and I am going to talk about the plot a little bit. So if you're looking for a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, don't wait for some pretentious idiot on YouTube to tell you whether you should read a book or not. Go away, read the book, and then you can come back. Oryx and Crake by the legendary Margaret Atwood. This is only my second Atwood read after The Handmaid's Tale, but it definitely won't be the last. This was one of those perfect reading experiences for me. I didn't know anything about the book. It was only on my TBR list because it was recommended by you, my viewers. I saw it in a charity shop. I didn't even read the blurb on the back. I just dived in. Dove. Dido? Dildo? The plot. Well, this is where I have to reveal some spoilers because the story is told kind of back to front, or at least it jumps around in 2 or 3 different time frames. I just love this style of storytelling, and in particular the way that Margaret Atwood delivers the structure. It's a very narrow perspective, and I was never 100% confident that the narrator was reliable at all. Excuse me, I digress. The plot. The world has suffered some sort of catastrophe. A man who calls himself Snowman, who believes he may be the last human left on Earth, lives up a tree by the sea near a tribe of mutants, humanoid looking creatures. It's not that clear at the beginning of the book what they are. In flashbacks from Snowman's perspective, we learned that he was once a guy called Jimmy. He had something to do with the apocalyptic event, and he knows all about these humanoid creatures. It takes the whole book to fill in that gap, from when Jimmy is a young boy, through his childhood. He then meets a guy called Glenn, who we eventually know as Crake, and into adulthood. Glenn, or Crake, who is a genius, works for a kind of genetic pharmaceutical company, develops a wonder drug that turns out to be a cover for a deadly global pandemic. Of course, you know all this because you've read the book. Now, I've read plenty of post-apocalyptic books. In fact, I made a top 10 video. It's one of my favourite subgenres in science fiction. But I don't think any of them had a pre-apocalypse world quite so established as in this book. 90% of the story is set before that pandemic. It's totally understandable to do that. If you're writing a story within this genre, surely the hook, all the cool stuff, is in the aftermath. It's a story about survival and rebuilding a civilization. But Oryx and Crake is set in this pseudo dystopia that is as much about the near future and the everyday darkness as it is about that Hollywood showstopper event. How to describe the world? There is a huge gulf between the rich and the poor, the have and the have-nots. Corporations are massively powerful. They seem to be the main employer of the population, and I think most people live on these huge gated communities which are owned by the corporations. But because the whole story is told through the eyes of Jimmy, who is just about on the right side of that fence, he is slightly educated, he is employed, although it's under the wing of Crake. That darkness is slightly muted, hence pseudo-dystopia. It's all about one person's perspective. I think Atwood, that sounds a bit blunt, doesn't it? I think Margaret has looked at where the world is now, or in 2003, and projected an escalation, a worst case scenario into this story. Cloned bodies are grown for spare parts, teenagers watch child pornography and take drugs all day, weird genetically altered chickens with no heads provide fast food chains with meat. And at the centre of it all is Crake, her genius lone gunman who has the ability to wipe the slate clean in the name of what? Ideology? Progress? Ego? I'm not sure what it is, but it's absolutely terrifying. Maybe the effect of all of this was enhanced because I read it in the middle of a real world pandemic. What is happening right now with COVID used to be confined to the pages of science fiction. Cheer up, everybody. Back to the plot, sort of. Jimmy, Snowman, survives the pandemic because Crake made him immune. He wanted him to live on after the event. He had a purpose for him. On the side, as part of his mad master plan, Crake actually made those genetically engineered humanoids, the Crakers, to, I think, to inherit the earth. They are designed to be a passive plant-eating people that can only give birth at certain times. They are Craig's version of Human 2.0. Jimmy is supposed to be the custodian, I suppose, the link to the past, the one that ensures they survive and flourish. But obviously it's all against his will. For me, this was the very core of the story. It brings up all sorts of thought experiments and discussions, which the very best of literature always does. It's also where Oryx and Crake is so different from any other post-apocalyptic book I've ever read. It's not this dirty, broken aftermath. It has consequences, and it also looks to the future. And it's genius writing that one of the people who was not responsible but at ground zero when the catastrophe happened is telling the rest of the story going forward in time. Because it's like Jimmy has been tricked into being the last man on Earth. Like Crake knew that he would make a better job of having to come up with a creation story for the Crakers, so he gets to rewrite the world in his own vision. So maybe Crake knew that he was a bit of a psycho, but still believed that it was the right thing to do to wipe out the human race. But he knew that his own ego couldn't be the one that set up the rest. It's like Crake knew that he couldn't be the one that survived and helped humanity move forward. It had to be someone who was more passive. So even though he was crazy and he believed in that fundamental reason to wipe out humanity, he also knew that his ego wasn't the right type to be the only man left over at the end, I think. So Jimmy is this fascinating, reluctant messiah god type character. The Crakers keep coming up to him and asking him what things are, what things mean, what the world is around them. He is a teacher to them as students, and there's this responsibility that the knowledge that he passes on, the influence that he has on them and what he tells them is going to be the future of this planet for possibly millions of years. I've never really experienced a character quite like that. And somehow Margaret has managed to make me think about whether wiping out humanity and starting all over again is actually a good idea. If we're going to destroy ourselves anyway, or create some sort of living hell, why not redesign ourselves and start again? That's what a machine would do. Project this story thousands of years into the future, and we could have a population of maybe not perfect, but certainly better suited, more sustainable human hybrid. Our version of humanity was just the angry, wasteful, violent, disgusting precursor that gave birth to the future. That's fucked up. And I'm so happy that this is just part one of a trilogy, because I think I'm going to find out what happens next. There's a whole other side to this book bubbling along underneath as well. I think it's something to do with, would somebody like Crake only come into existence because of the environment, because of the world around him? Is this a warning from Margaret Atwood? Is she saying that with our current level of technology and our not so great moral compass, that it's just a matter of time before somebody could decide to end the world in this manner, and they would have the tools to do it? And if there is something I missed in this book, or I didn't quite get on a first read, because I'm definitely going to read it again, it's the story of Oryx and what that means to the main plot. I didn't quite understand if writing so extensively about child pornography or that kind of abuse is meant to show us that it will eventually just become normal and part of the fabric of society, as if it's not quite such a bad thing. Whoa, that doesn't sound right at all. I don't mean that Margaret Atwood thinks that it's not such a bad thing. It's the way that these disgusting acts are perceived in the book, that they are more generally accepted. That a world where you can have TV shows that show child porn, whether they're illegal or not, I suppose they exist in the real world. You can see I'm slightly confused at what the purpose of having so much of that in the story actually is. Obviously you can see that those two major components haven't quite slotted together for me just yet, but it's not a negative, and it just means I get to discover that bit next time. In conclusion, I loved everything about this book, from the writing, the structure, the way that the details are revealed to us, to that heavy dark story. I didn't understand everything that was going on. It's quite complex to me, and I've been thinking about it ever since I finished it over a week ago. They're the best kind of books though, aren't they? When the author gets that balance of story, theme and deep pondering just right. I thought I was going to get another Earth Abides or The Road, but it's much more Children of Men, where it's more about the vibrant near future rather than the dead post-apocalypse, sort of. A score for Oryx and Crake. It's really great. Thank you so much for recommending it. I'm feeling 93. Do I say 93 for all the really good ones? It feels like I'm saying 93 a lot, but I'm feeling 93. And I hope that goes up when this book becomes just part one of a hopefully great trilogy. Did you love Oryx and Crake? Did you hate Oryx and Crake? Surely that's not possible. Or are you stuck somewhere in the middle? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, please. Also, if you have any more Margaret Atwood recommendations, I want to know. I've read The Handmaid's Tale and I'm going to be reading its sequel. Can't remember what it's called, but I'll be reading both of those again pretty soon. So chuck those recommendations